I'll be good. I'll keep kosher. I'll keep the Sabbath. Just find me a parking spot. Just as the words are coming out of his mouth, he sees a guy pulling out of a parking spot. He says, "Oh, thanks, God. I got it taken care of." Right?
Oh, that was pretty good. I got it.
So even if you prove it,
Right.
right? Even if you prove it, the bottom line is, people, if they want to hear the proof, if they want to act upon the proof, like I could sit down and tell someone a proof, and everyone knows full well that there are consequences to having this proven.
Right.
You have to do something about it.
That makes it difficult.
And people generally don't like to hear proofs that are going to mean that you're going to have to make changes and do things and alter your lifestyle. So we'll do the proofs because I just think they are so fascinating. But the bottom line is, I think even after we're done with the proofs, the believers are going to believe and the non-believers are going to not believe, even if the proofs are proof positive.
So you don't think we're going to grow? Our audience is not going to grow?
No, as a matter of fact, it might shrink.
We might lose a couple.
Because we might lose a couple and say, uh-oh, if you're going to keep proving this. And I'll tell you, one time I heard a story. One of my rabbis was teaching a group, a number of couples, and one of the rabbis, he was showing proofs of the Torah's veracity. And one fellow says, "Stop." So the rabbi said, What? He said, stop right there. So the rabbi said, he thought the guy's like, kind of strange. He was brought in to teach a class, and so one of the students just tells him to stop right in the middle of the class. So the guy said, "If you continue, I'm going to have to make changes, and I don't want to make changes." So still, the rabbi thought that it was a gag, and so he just kept going, and the guy got up and walked out.
Wow.
The guy left. Honest fellow. The guy,
Yeah,
the student was really honest. The student was really honest. And as a matter of fact, the rabbi said later that he asked all the people to tell him who the guy was because he wanted to follow up with him. But the friends, no one would tell him. They were all covering for him.
Wow.
So, this is these proofs. Proofs are very good. I believe that the proofs that we're going to talk about, I think that they are ironclad. I mean, really, really good.
Well, we'll see how good I am because I'm watching the count now. As if the numbers start dropping, I know you're doing a good job.
Right, there you go. I'm just I'm just doing this intro to make sure that anyone that doesn't want to hear these proofs is head for the hills.
Leave now.
Right? Yeah, okay. ESPN.com. Everything will be okay there, and you'll be nice and you'll be happy, and you're not going to hear anything you don't want to hear.
Fair enough.
There, it'll be good,
That's fair.
Yeah. So first of all, what are we going to do to prove it? How would you prove the Torah?
I would think the best way to be, if you could show that this could only have come from God. In other words, what you're reading in the Torah, this was 3,000 years ago, something that could only have come from God and that time, I think that would help prove the Torah right there.
So there is an organization, it's called Aish Torah, and they've got a website, aish.com, AISH.com. I'm going to give them a little plug here. So they have put together a seminar, which they call Discovery Seminar. And in the Discovery Seminar, they have a booklet. One of the sessions that they do in this Discovery Seminar is they try to prove the Torah. They try to prove the divinity of the Torah. That's what the seminar is all about. One of their sessions is called Information Only the Author Could Have Known.
That's a good one.
Right? For example, when you read about, let's say you read about some story, some guy writes a book about some industry or about the CIA, and he says stuff in the book, and then later on it comes out that this stuff came out. You say, wow, that guy really, really knew what he was talking about. He really researched it. He wasn't just making stuff up, and it makes it very impressive.
And just in the opposite, if it later on it comes out that it's not true, the book really is not.
Right,
not
the guy's he was just making stuff up, So the Torah has in it some statements that not necessarily meant to prove God. There isn't you open up to chapter 48 in Leviticus, this is the proof of God chapter. But the Torah just mentions things along the way that are really pretty amazing. I happen to have a picture at home of a drawing that was in the inside of some temple in ancient Egypt. Right?
Right.
It's a drawing. Now, there is a verse in the book of Genesis, and it says that when Joseph became the viceroy of Egypt, it says that Pharaoh took off his signet ring, he handed it to Joseph, he put a chain of gold, a ravid hazahav, a chain of gold around him, and he wrapped him in a cloth of linen, fine linen. And he said, "You're now the viceroy of Egypt." So there is a picture, and I don't know what temple it comes from. I could look it up in my book at home. Right. It's got all the information, exactly where it came from, when they discovered it and all that. And there is a picture of Pharaoh sitting on his throne, and a guy is standing in front of him, and the guy looks Semitic in the picture.
Right.
And Pharaoh is taking off his signet and handing it over to this guy. They are putting a necklace of gold around him and wrapping him in linen.
Wow. Now, do you know how old this picture is?
I don't know how old it is. I don't have the dates.
Right.
And I don't know if we've exactly correlated it. But let's say it's not a picture of Joseph becoming the viceroy of Egypt. Okay. Let's say it's not. Let's say it's the standard picture of any guy that becomes a viceroy of Egypt.
Right.
Okay? You know what that would mean? Whoever wrote the Torah had an intimate knowledge of the internal workings of ancient Egypt.
That's true.
Which would mean either one or two things. Either that guy was like a huge Egyptologist, right?
Right.
Now, when would the Torah have been written? Let's see. So, what year are you going to have this being at? Like, 1000 BC, 1500 BC? Right. Well, how would that person know what was going on 1,000 years earlier in ancient Egypt?
Right. The history books were not as clear.
Right.
As
He didn't go to the Haifa Department of Egyptology.
Or just Google it.
Right. He didn't Google it.
Right.
Or maybe the book, either they had a very clear tradition of what would happen in ancient Egypt, which is pretty interesting, or the book was actually written around that time that those events happened.
Right.
And it really is, therefore, that old.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting. And I'm telling you, you can see it crystal clear. It's not one of those fuzzy pictures like, well, if you look at it from the side, you can kind of see. This thing is as clear as can be.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what's the most famous one. The most famous one is the one that the Talmud says is the proof of God.
Okay.
The Talmud itself says there's a proof of God.
This is big.
Yeah, the Talmud itself says.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is how it goes. We are told what makes animals kosher and what makes them not kosher.
Right.
Okay? So 4 more people just dropped out.
Oh, they're gone.
Right?
Kosher.
They're gone. Kosher? This is going to be proof.
I knew we shouldn't have put this during lunch.
This is going to be proof that you like people like
ham. I don't know.
I do remember one time I was teaching a lunch and learn many years ago, and I was talking and I said, well, let's just say, for example, let's use keeping kosher as an example. And they went through this whole proof about, like, are you supposed to keep kosher? And there was a lady that was eating an Arby's roast beef sandwich as I was talking. And, you know, she's interested. She's eating. She's nodding. She's paying attention. She's taking notes. And she's eating this sandwich.
Right.
And later on, I wondered, like, how did she keep doing that? And then I realized, like, to her, it's just like she's taking a course.
This is
like
a history class,
right,
or
it's
whatever
just,
it is.
Just like a fascinating course, but it really didn't have anything to do with reality. So anyway, the Torah says a kosher animal has got to have 2 identifying signs. You can tell an animal's kosher if it chews its cud and it has split hooves. Chews its cud and has split hooves. The Torah then goes on to list 4 animals that are not kosher.
Right.
And it tells you why they're not. It tells you specifically why they're not. And they are. And this is in Leviticus chapter 11, the first 8 verses. It is repeated again in Deuteronomy, because a lot of things are repeated in Deuteronomy. The word Deuteronomy is like deutero-onomy. Deutero means second.
Okay.
Duet, right? Second. So a lot of Deuteronomy is a repeat of many things that you find earlier in the Torah. So sure enough, the kosher laws show up first in Leviticus. They're repeated again in Deuteronomy. Leviticus 11, 1 through 8, first 8 verses, and Deuteronomy 14th chapter, verses 4 through 8. So it says as follows. God spoke to Moses and Aaron, telling them to speak to the Israelites and convey the following to them. Of all the animals in the world, these are the ones that you may eat. Among mammals, you may eat any one that has true hooves that are cloven and thus chews its cud.
Right.
And that chews its cud. Of the and it doesn't have a cloven hoof.
Right.
So it's only got one of the two signs. The shafan is unclean to you. It chews its cud, and it doesn't have a cloven hoof. The arnevet, which is, I guess, like the rabbit or something like that, chews its cud, and it doesn't have a cloven hoof.
Right.
So there are three animals that chew their cud, and they don't have a cloven hoof. By the way, the truth is the shafan and the arnevet don't really chew their cud. But to the outside observer, they would look as though they chew their cud.
Okay.
Okay? And number 4 is the pig. The pig is unclean to you. It has a cloven hoof, but it doesn't chew its cud. Can't eat any of those animals.
Okay.
And Deuteronomy repeats this again. These are the animals you may eat: ox, sheep, goat, gazelle, deer, antelope, ibex, the chamois, don't know what that is. The bison, that's a shout out. Ted Turner, by the way, sponsoring this show. The bison, right? And the giraffe.
Well, you can eat the bison,
Yes,
or you can't?
you can.
Oh, okay, good.
Bison, yeah, they're just big cows.
And giraffe, I heard they had that new Mick giraffe at McDonald's, which is a new burger you can get.
That's right.
Good.
That's right. You know, you sit on the bar stools when you eat that.
That's pretty good.
Right. So, but anyway, the bisons are kosher. They're in the cow family.
Okay.
So they're cool.
Fair enough.
Okay. You may eat any animal that has a true hoof that's cloven into 2 parts and chews its cud. Among the animals that don't, and here comes the repeat, and it talks about the camel, the arnevet, the shafan, and they chew their cud, don't have split hoof, and the pig.
And the pig.
Doesn't chew its cud.
Right.
Okay. So, it turns out, the Talmud tells us, that we have a little rule here. And the rule is that you have to have both signs. Now, it's true, though, every ruminator, that means every animal that chews its cud, and this is what Maimonides tells us in his laws of when he writes all this up into law, he says all animals that are cloven-hoofed ruminate with the exception of the pig. Okay. So there's one animal on earth that has a split hoof and it doesn't chew its cud. Okay? Now, Moses told us a rule. Split hooves, chew your cud. If I was Moses, I would then shut up.
So if I was Moses just making this thing up.
Yeah, I'm Moses. Or some committee that calls themselves, that's going to publish under the name Moses. Right?
Yeah, you don't want to put your neck out on the line on this one here.
Right. So just say, here's the rule, split hooves, chew its cud, and then be quiet. Okay. Because if you start to list and say, this is the one that has split hooves but doesn't chew its cud, then what happens when people move to Australia and they find some other animal that has split hooves and doesn't chew its cud? Then everyone's going to go, oh, the rabbis didn't know about that one, or the author didn't know about that one. It turns out only one is listed as having split hoofs and chew its cud, and it turns out there's only one on planet Earth.
Now that's, so unless Moses was an amazing zoologist,
right,
and I mean, at this time and was getting books from Australia, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to argue because, you know, who would put their neck out and say something like that?
So you said it. Here's the quote from the Talmud in Chulin. The Talmud in Chulin says, this is the proof of the Torah. The Talmud in Chulin says, was Moses a hunter or an archer? Did he know so much about animals? This refutes those who maintain that the Torah was not divinely revealed.
I think that's a good point.
That's the Talmud. So that's the way, if you ever say, is there a proof of the Torah's divinity in the Talmud? This is the Talmud's proof. Now, it also turns out, by the way, going the other direction, that actually there's only one animal on the planet that chews its cud that doesn't have split hooves. And guess who that is?
Who's that?
Our camel, the one that was listed here.
Wow.
Now, you say it might sound like 3. The truth is they put in the other 2 because the other 2, they don't really chew their cud.
But it looks like they chew their
They look like they chew their cud. So the Torah put them in also because it's easy for you to make a mistake. So the Torah listed all 3. But the truth is there's only 1. And the other 2, because they look like it and you would easily make a mistake. So all 4 of those animals, those are the only 4 on planet Earth. And the Torah lists them.
That's pretty good.
Right. Now, who else could have known about that?
That's a good point. I'm just trying to think if this will work with my cousins up north, and they're thinking, is this going to give them any reason to think? That's a pretty amazing one. Well, the other one we talked about a little bit, and then before you get, the difference between Judaism, and this is a question that I was asked when we're talking about this topic. The difference between Judaism and any other religion. In any other religion, it started with a guy who was off in the woods and he saw God and God talked to him and he was inspired and he came up with his great religion. And I can understand how that can even be put up. If you want to build a conspiracy, that's not a bad one. I mean, Jim saw it happen. He talked to God and he passed the religion down. And I can see how you can make that conspiracy work. The difference is in Judaism, and this one I can see if you have an answer for this. 3 million people saw God. So for this conspiracy to work, one, you had to have either 3 million people that were willing just to get together and say, okay, this is the story we're going to tell and we're sticking to it.
Right.
Or that somewhere down the road, the Jews weren't smart enough to believe that, okay, we just told you it's 3 million people and no one decided to tell their kids, their grandparents, their grandkids and everything else about it. So it's just, this is the way it happened and they believe it. So Jews are either the most conniving people in the world, which a lot of people say, or they're probably the dumbest people in the world.
Let's examine that.
Right.
Let's examine this whole thing that you just laid out there. You said that the Torah's story is, the storyline of the Torah is, God gathered about 3 million people together at Mount Sinai. We figure that the number 3 million because it says there were 603,550 males between the ages of 20 and 60. Mm-hmm. So you can extrapolate out that there's probably a general population of 3 million people. Okay. God spoke to all 3 million people, said, I am Lord your God. You all saw the movie, right? You know exactly what happened. Okay.
Right.
I'm Lord your God. So therefore, God spoke to everybody. Every other religion, God always spoke to one person. That's the story. Jesus is risen, but no one saw him rise. They all came back the next day, and he's not here. So they said, must have risen because he's not here anymore. But no one really saw it happen.
Right.
They just sort of deduced it.
Right.
And on and on and on. I mean, the emperor of Japan came down from the sun or something like that. But, no one really saw it happen.
Right.
Okay, that's cool. Now, let's figure this out for a minute. This is a wonderful proof because if you really, really want to make your point, so your God, speak straight to the people and tell them, this is my man, he's Moses, I'm going to give him the book, you can trust him because I say so, he's the man, he's my candidate, I endorse him. That's the best way to do it.
If you got that behind your religion's got some validity.
It's certainly the best way to do it. Why does no one else try that?
Well, 2 points on it. When I was studying last night, it did say, one, God even mentions in the Torah, no one else will even come up with this. No one else will even say this ever.
That's right.
And if anyone ever did, I guess that would kind of disprove the Torah right there.
Right. So why hasn't anyone ever tried it? Like, why didn't the Christians say that there was a big mob of people and they all saw Jesus was laying there dead and he rose and he went up to heaven? Why didn't they say that?
Because that's a tough one to back up.
It's really, really hard.
I can't get 5 people to agree on anything here, and you're going to get 3 million people to agree on this story, and not one of them to tell the truth. They're all going to lie.
If it's a lie, how are you going to convince anyone of it? Because they come on and say, there were millions of people saw Jesus rise up and go to heaven. Who said, really? How come I never heard of that?
Yeah, you think that would have made the news?
Why did anyone, you ever hear that? No one ever heard of that. So therefore, the people that make that claim are not ever going to make a claim because it's so easily refutable.
Right.
Everyone's going to say, oh yeah, that's, it would be like saying, like, who won the game last night,
Right.
And the Bulls won last night. Oh yeah? I don't think so. I mean, I thought I saw it. I didn't see that, but I thought it went the other way. Is that going to go? It's not going to last more than a second. So therefore, you'd never make that claim. Now, the fact that the Jews made that claim, either they are so audacious,
right?
Right? You know, like wow, they came up with like such a whopping big claim. But let's think about it. If a group of people came up with this and they're trying to get a bunch of followers to keep the stuff and stop eating the split hooves, and the,
right.
you know, and when to stop eating the pigs, and to start having their wives attend ritual baths once a month, and to keep the Sabbath, and to do all this stuff. Wow, you know, that's a lot. And you're telling me this is all based on a story that I never heard of? And by the way, how did you hear of it? If we didn't hear of it, so then they're going to have to say, what's the only answer? If you say, well, how come we never heard of this?
I mean, God only told me. I mean,
well, if it's back to the God only told me, then you're right back where you started.
That's what I'm saying. That's not going to work.
Right. The other one is, well, you all forgot it.
You forgot.
You forgot. There's only one problem. It says in Deuteronomy that the Torah is not going to be forgotten. And it's clear in the Torah, and this is one of the biggest stories in the Torah. This is, we're going to have the holiday of Shavuos in another week or two. We're going to celebrate that. It's the main story in the Torah.
Yeah,
so you can't really say that you guys forgot it, because they're going to open up the book, and you know, when someone gets to the end and it says there in the end of Deuteronomy, and this Torah will never be forgotten. And someone's going like, hey, you just told me we forgot it. And it says it never will be forgotten. So is the book lying, or you lying, or something? You know. I'm not throwing out my pork chops all that quick.
And that's another good point, too. If you're going to make up a religion, why would you make up and try to sell it to 3 million people and their ancestors? Would you probably make up something that's a little easier? I mean, you've made up a religion, and these guys it tells them how to eat, how to sleep, how to have sex, how to do what you can't do, what you can do. I'm thinking, if you're going to come up with a religion and you're going to sell it to me, make it a little easier.
Right.
So I don't, you know, whoever made that, I was not a good salesman if that was made up.
You know, one of the famous proofs of the Torah is that the Torah tells people that they are not allowed to farm once every 7 years. That's a pretty tough one. No farming once every 7 years.
But you're going to be okay, because the 6th year is going to be great.
6 years are going to be a bumper crop, so don't worry about it. And by the way, every 50 years, after you do cycles of 7, 7, 7, 7 times 7, and then the 50th year is also a Jubilee year. So then you got to do 2 years in a row. And there the Torah says you'll have a big enough crop in the 6th year to keep you all the way good for the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th into the 9th year, into the beginning of the next cycle. Wow, that's pretty good. Who is going to go out on a limb and do that? You know what that would be like? That would be sort of like a guy actually saying when the world is going to end. Like, could you imagine, like, who would be such an idiot to actually pick the day, at least it's within his lifetime?
Right.
You know, if you want to pick a day and say it's going to be in like 150 years, that's cool. Because
that would be smarter.
You won't be around. But who's going to actually pick a day and say it's coming up soon? I mean, at least if you want to get people to believe in it, make it someday down the road so you can sell the T-shirts and the books and you know, doing the lecture circuit. But you pick a date, and the day comes and the day goes. I mean, give me a break.
I mean, according to what you just said, I think Judaism would have lasted about 7 years.
Yeah.
The 7th year when they're starving and not having any food.
Six. They're saying no bumper crop. I'm out of here.
Right. I think that would have been
I'm out of here. Nice try, rabbis, but you know, we're out of here. So yet the Torah does that. The Torah does that. The Torah is willing to do that and comfortable in doing that. So that is something that not only would no one in their right mind have ever included in the Torah, but certainly not with the promise you're going to have a bumper crop. They would have said, you just have to have faith. It's all going to work out.
Well, that's interesting. And a good question was just asked here. Is it then okay for Jews to question the Torah? Because, I mean, again, if not, these are great proofs that you're talking about, but why don't we have proofs every other year? I mean, you know what? Last year the proof was instead of the sea splitting, something else is going to split. Is it okay for me, for secular Jews to, you know, I doubt this a little bit. Give me some proof. I mean, is it okay to have this show that we're having right now? We have to prove it.
It is definitely okay because maybe we'll end with this one because it makes the point.
Okay.
There's the famous fish, the fish instruction. You know, some fish are kosher, some fish are not. The last 3 people just dropped out.
Yeah, that's
okay?
it. No,
and because here comes the lobsters and the shrimp, you know?
Lobster fest is out.
Yeah, this is getting bad. Okay,
Oh.
so the Torah says any fish that has fins and scales is kosher. If it doesn't have fins and scales, it's not kosher. Now the fin is that little thing underneath the fish that, you know, keeps it swimming in the direction it wants, and the scales, of course, are the scales that cover the fish.
Right.
It just happens to be, says the Mishnah, that anything that has scales has fins. There are some things that have fins, but they don't have scales, but if it has scales, it has fins. So therefore, why wouldn't it just been smarter for the Torah to say anything that has scales?
That's true, okay.
Anything that has scales. Why'd I have to say anything that has scales and fins? Why'd I have to do that? So the Talmud gives an interesting answer. The Talmud says, in a certain way, I guess you could say God was just showing off. In other words, to make the Torah greater, to show you something that we know, anything that has scales has fins. The Torah didn't have to say fins, but the Torah threw it in anyway to show you all fish that are kosher have scales, and they have fins too. And it's something that the Torah knew, that they're never going to find a fish that has scales, but it doesn't have fins. And therefore, the Torah threw it in. But why did the Torah throw it in? Just to make us appreciate that the Torah really knows what it's talking about. If that's the case, then what that means is that we're supposed to stop and appreciate these things and analyze them and think about them and question them, but also be open to read what the conclusions are.
And that's interesting. Now, another question that came in, which kind of follows that a little bit, is, and I understand the proofs that you read here, is it possible that any of the other religions, any of the other books, from Christianity to Islam to anything else, is there any validity to them? I mean, because are we supposed to accept that this is the only truth and there is no other?
I personally, not that I'm a big, you know, comparative religions guy, but I personally have never read or seen presented any identifying information from the New Testament or from the Quran, both of which, by the way, acknowledge the primacy of the Old Testament. Our Torah is acknowledged, certainly, I mean, the New Testament couldn't be a New Testament without there being an old one, right? And even the Quran acknowledges the primacy of the Torah as the Word of God.
Well, I think also they might do it because they get that little extra benefit that we've got with the whole nation seeing it, so they get to claim the whole world see it and then build their religion from that. So that's a little extra bonus.
But I've never seen any identifying information in any of those books, and I've never seen anything even quoted about there being identifying information in any of those books like we see from here. And I've certainly never seen any of like the deeper information, like they don't have a Talmud or anything like that that deduces any of these things. So I don't know. Maybe if someone has one, they can send it in to us, and we'll
I'd like to hear
about that. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Well, okay, so what I'm getting here is that there is proof of the Torah. There's plenty of it out there. And if people understood this, so you're telling me if my cousins from the north, if they understood this, if they got this part, would they then, and because I guess it's a question you brought up at the beginning, would they then show up this Friday night or Saturday in shul? Is this what's going to make the difference?
Well,
because
they would only show up this Friday and Saturday in shul if we told them about it on Friday afternoon. But I think if we let it sit like by 24 hours, it would already, well, you know.
So you think there's still going to be shrimp cocktail going on Friday night?
I think, you know, these things don't last too long. This is the famous story of Elijah on Mount Carmel. He challenged the prophets of Baal. And they both said, I'll bring my offering and you bring your offering, but we're not going to light them on fire. Which hear you. And, you know, anyway, they fall down there exhausted, nothing happens. Elijah then says, okay, bring water. They bring water. They soak the thing really, really, really wet. And then Elijah says, God, answer me. The thing just goes up in flames. Everyone's watching it, and they go, well, it is clear Elijah's the real guy, and these guys are phonies. They take all those guys, they run them down to the river, they slaughter them, they kill them all dead. Okay, in the meantime, there was a nasty king, really bad king. His name was Ahab. Got to be bad with a name like Ahab, right? I agree there. And he had a wife named Jezebel, really bad. So Jezebel shows up. Jezebel sends a message to Elijah, and she says, you better get out of here because, you know, you're doing okay today, but tomorrow I'm going to kill you. Tomorrow. And you know what Elijah did? He ran for the hills. Elijah just pulled off the biggest coup. He's riding high, and yet he ran away because he knew full well that all these proofs are good for about a day.
About a day.
And he knew that by tomorrow they'll forget, and then she'll come and get him, and no one's going to lift a finger.
Well, the great thing about this is, with Jeff and the rabbi, we have these things in reruns, and we have these online. So tomorrow you might have to watch again, and you might have to send this to your friends. And you might have to keep sending it to your friends because that's the only way we're going to get this out there.
We should send out like emails reminding people to watch the show again.
Watch it again. Yeah. I tell you, this was one of the most interesting shows I think we've had. I really enjoyed this, and I'm hoping this might last more than 24 hours.
Maybe.
If not, watch it in reruns.
Maybe.
But either way, if all else fails, we will be back. 1 week, well, not 1 week from today, because 1 week from today will be Memorial Day.
Right.
So 2 weeks from today, we will be back.
All right.
Thanks for watching.